All right, we've got Luke Powers, co-founder, CEO of Gearflow, parts marketplace for the heavy equipment industry, today on the Building the Groundwork podcast. Looking forward to catching up with Luke and going over what they're working on and sharing probably a lot of our common journeys that we've both have had over the last couple of years. Welcome, Luke.
Hey, Alex, this is great to be here. I think we first met at a small Chicago conference, like in the suburbs here, for dealers. And we were just both starting out, and it's pretty cool, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great. Great to be with you again. Had the opportunity to meet both you and Ben a couple times over the years, so it's always good to share like those common experiences, right? We both have tech companies in this old, antiquated industry that's used to doing things certain ways. So it's fun to learn from each other, and we pay close attention to what you guys are doing. It's inspiring to us as well.
Yeah, I think our backgrounds are, it's scary how similar, but coming from the industry. And by the way, you mentioned Ben. Ben's my co-founder, so he came from a company called Data2, programmatic advertising, and we were fortunate enough to meet in Chicago in 2015, and he jumped in with me in 2018. But from your background as well.
Let me start selfishly. You played basketball. I played basketball. Yeah. You went to John Carroll, which I know the school pretty well. What was your game like in college? Like, what kind of player were you? What position? What were your strengths?
I was pretty, I spent a lot of time in perfecting how to jump off the bench and cheer for the guys on the floor and sit back down. No, it was. Okay. I played 2 years, and I think. We played a system that we do a full court press. So when I was in, I would actually be the big guy pressing up on the point guard, which was so fun. It was so fun. So we were just trying to trap, and so I was doing that a lot. Just best shape of your life, and the skills you learn at the college level were totally different than high school. How they see the game, how they play, how they coach. It's kind of like a job. Honestly, that's why I took the other 2 years to actually have the college experience.
Good for you.
Yeah. How about you?
So we played a similar style. We played, we pressed like full court. It was a lot of like motion offense, like a lot of like passing and moving. I played in high school I was going to ask you about like coaches too. Yeah. The coach I played for in high school is a guy named Chris Mooney. He's the head coach at Richmond right now. Okay. He's been to the NCAA tournament like Sweet 16 like 2 or 3 times. He played at Princeton. And so in high school, we ran the Princeton offense. So I was very used to it when I went to college. Like, Princeton is known for like everyone being fundamentally sound, like big men being able to handle, pass, move. You're really in constant motion, a lot of backdoor cuts, and like learning that type of offense. And he was unbelievable for me for basketball, but also like professionally. He was like, he shaped me in many ways, like, pushing me, but he was that coach that always knew like when to like really be on you and then like when to kind of lay back. And that's something that was very pivotal for me, like as a leader. Like you got to know when to like really push, but then, be aware of like, what, we haven't had a good day or a good month. It's like maybe like I ease up a little bit because you don't want to be drowned out, right?
What's cool, I think what I took away is a really kind of cool topic to think about is the more you'd focus on a certain part of the game, it's almost like more opportunities would come up to improve, which was a paradox, right? Like it was like there's many different roles of play on the basketball court and within the team, but the more you like really became a master of your role, whether it's rebounding, whether it's setting screens, whether it's like mid-range jumpers, whatever, it became like what you just were obsessed about. And I think translating into work, that I would say that, and the other one was, if you remember, we didn't really get Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, right? Like, I don't think people really understand how much time athletes put in. I mean, you're not going home. You're on the road, you're in film. And that's like work too, right? So it really prepared you, I think, for after college. A lot more
it's funny.
Class, yeah.
I like that you brought that up because it is true. Like Christmas was, I would open gifts with my family in the morning and I'd drive back to school. And we had, I don't remember if we had practice Christmas night, but like we were back at 2-a-days on the 26th.
Right.
And, that winter break from, the 26th to early January was 2 practices a day.
Right.
And, you went to school up north, so did I. It's like 15 degrees and you're just miserable. Yeah. And your body, you're worn out. You feel like it's dark all day. Right. No one else is at school. And so like you're the only people there. I remember those days very vividly.
Thanksgiving was the one I remember more. Like Thanksgiving, it's like a big night to see all your friends at home Wednesday night. And we're still at school. Like to your point, it's cold. We're going to practice. Thanksgiving's off, right? I think everybody, unless you're in a tournament, then it's not. Yep. But yeah, and I think the building up character, building up persistence, building up just dealing with hard realities at the college level, any level. I was D3, it's any level. I mean, it's you got to want to do it. You got to love it, right? And I think pushing through that. I love to work with people who've had that experience. I love people that have pushed themselves to, I don't know, a year or two in the military or reserves or like just pushing yourself beyond what's comfortable because we're that's probably our status quo. It's just what's comfortable, and understanding what that's like. Just naturally more apt to succeed.
Couldn't agree more. And then how do you deal with defeat? Like our best season in college was after we had lost like 3 games in a row. And it was the only time in the 4 years of my career that we ever lost like games in a row. And it was like 3 in a row, and then we ripped off like 17 wins in a row, went to the Final Four. But yeah, it's like that's the other part of sports and athletics to me is like it's real life. How do you deal with defeat? Like you could either hang your head, you could either make excuses and blame other people, other things, or you figure it out.
That's right. And it's in the service of the team, right? Because you could say defeat as the W or the L at the end of the day, or it's the plays that you messed up. And everybody messes up, right? There's no way around it. So how do you deal with that? Do you learn from it? Do you let it kind of overtake you? That happens at work all the time, right? We're always striving to get better. And I think that muscle in your brain, as opposed to having somebody, some sage professor give you whatever grade based off, their knowledge, which can be objective. This is very non-objective, right? It's very black or white, and it's
absolutely,
I would say one other thing is the influence on the other players is tangible. So how your attitude and what you bring to the team, how you speak, how you lift others up, are you picking guys up off the floor? Like that is all. There's something about that, right? Like there's real energy there, and it's real. Like the team's able to go farther with that than teams that are individualistic.
I think I have to confess to that is that at that time in my life, I was not very good at that. I didn't understand that aspect of it. And I think if you ever talk to my teammates, they would probably say that's right. And that they tried to get me to understand that part. But look, I was young. I think the best person I've ever seen is Tom Brady with respect to that. Like just the unbelievable teammate that he was.
Right. Yeah.
Go
ahead.
So I got off a little tangent, but I had to ask you about basketball.
I love it.
So in your words, because no one can explain it better than you, what is Gearflow?
Yeah. We started as a marketplace. We started the company. And then what we found was contractors, so think heavy civil contractors that are building our infrastructure, they're laying our asphalt roads, they've got big fleets. Typically, they got mixed fleets, so many different brands. They don't want to shop for parts. They want to fix those machines, as you well know, with labor and parts to get that thing back up and running. Because there's huge economics around downtime. as you and everybody in the industry knows. There's an asphalt paver in Florida that actually factors downtime costs at $112K a day. So we evolved from this parts marketplace with the original idea being there's a lot of latent supply of parts sitting on shelves. So exposing that online would be a boon for the industry, for contractors. But that realization of them not wanting to shop turned it on its head. And so what Gearflow is a way for these contractors, any fleet owner, to either sign up for free or upgrade to Parts Hub Pro and basically run all of their procurement through the platform. So upload their fleet, onboard their team, and actually upload their vendors. So the dealers that they work with all the time, they buy equipment from, they maybe rent from, have relationships with other vendors that they work with, bring them all on the platform so that you don't have literally 40 different tabs open and you're making 100 plus phone calls a day to get your parts.
Sure.
It's all in one place, and it makes it a heck of a lot easier. Then the other side is actually built for the dealer side, for the vendor side, to make it an easier way for them to sell parts. So you can think of it as like, parts procurement software is what it is today, which has evolved from a parts marketplace. Yeah.
Interesting. So I want to go back in time. You got started in the business, in the industry. Was it for a rental company or a forklift dealer? What was your initial start?
Yeah, so my father-in-law started as a Genie dealer, Genie Industries, boom lifts, scissor lifts, in the 70s. He was their first dealer in the Midwest and started a couple companies, one of which I worked in for about 5 years. The family business is a wholesale re-rental company, so they will call on rental houses and rent large boom lifts, I think 150 feet, 180 feet, to the rental company, who then marks it up, ends it, and rents it to the end user. So very niche, wholesale rental. I got a really good, I think, perspective on the industry. I was able to travel around the country and talk to these great rental companies and dealers and just get to know these big projects happening throughout the country that these large machines would be needed on. That's really kind of what started me on the journey of parts, right? It's like same, with Heath, right? So much of this is uptime.
Yeah, definitely. And so you were exposed to the parts and service side at that time?
Yeah. So I was exposed from the impact to our P&L. It's like, man, when our machines go down, the hit to profit is like so direct. And so I was more on the fleet side. I think on the, our core business was rental. Those that have core businesses in, selling equipment, selling parts and service, they know for sure. You sell the machine for the parts profit lifetime. And then on the user side, like we were saying, 112K a day on a job site. So just big economics around the parts. And they've really always, since the dawn of email, like it's kind of been transacted the same way since that, like phone calls and emails. There is some, obviously parts portals per brand, but therein lies the issue. In order to run a big construction site, you need many different brands. And so therein lies the issue of why 92% of parts, is what we've recently learned, are transacted offline. So I think 92%. So I think if, looking at this like 15, 20 years ago, everyone was like, well, clearly it can be bought online. Like it's obvious. And it's just a different type of transaction. Like, yeah.
That's funny. 92%. And you're right. Like so many people just like assume that it would be done, but no one was doing it really large scale.
Right. I think, I think, as consumers, we use, commerce all day online. And if we need a new pair of shoes, we review, compare, cost compare, brand compare, make our decision to get our shoes coming. Well, if we're a mechanic in front of the machine, as you guys know, like oftentimes we don't know what part numbers we need. We can describe maybe the error code. We can describe the parts, the joystick, the right-hand hydraulic cylinder, whatever it might be. But then we wouldn't know necessarily what other parts to replace alongside that. So that, I think, is a lot of the reason why it hasn't just gone online to where like, oh, I know it's, part number 1, 2, 3. I'm going to look that up and I'm going to buy it and I sell it parts. What I'm actually doing is I'm calling that dealer, I'm driving to that dealer, I'm texting, I'm doing all these things which take a long time. But hey, I don't want to mess up. I want to make sure we get the right stuff, and I want to lean on them. So anyway, yeah. So that's what software is really good at. It's just got to be purpose built for it, which is it's just a great challenge. Yeah.
I was reading the Access, Lift, and Handlers magazine. My monthly reading material.
Nice.
I didn't know this. You mentioned earlier that we met at it was an IADA meeting. Yeah. And you were doing Gearflow at the time. We weren't on the service version of our product. But yeah, I had no idea you had started a company called equiprent.com. Yeah. And it was a marketplace for contractors to rent and also buy machines or list machines.
Right.
And you never, I don't know how that was never brought up. Maybe you were being nice, but because we were trying to go that path, and you had already tried it 2 years before, and it didn't work out. Maybe that's why. I don't know, but
yeah, it's a good. So yeah, and it'd be interesting to hear your premise, your thoughts around that angle. My thought was like, man, there's so much local supply and inventory that. Again, you need to call around, like you have to like go do the work to figure out what it is. Like it should just be easy for you to like clearly like rent and buy locally. And lo and behold, we started the business. An R is a half of an M. So it's like, oh, it's equipment.com. It's like, well, no, it's rent. And like, oh, okay, well, do you rent? It's like, well, what actually ended up happening is we had this pull into parts. But what was your experience with it?
I completely agree. Like it makes a lot of sense, and I was a salesperson myself, and so when we started our version of it 2 years after you guys, like we got a lot of pushback, and the typical pushback was you're trying to eliminate salesmen. It's like no, like I thought just like you're saying, it's common sense basically that. Hey, for customers to want to buy parts online, I thought it was common sense for customers to want to rent or buy machines online. I mean, the reality is that customers have been buying used machines online through Ritchie Brothers for many years. I think they started selling used machines online in 2004, maybe 2002, and so I just thought it was common sense, it was natural, and it's not reasonable or realistic if I own a dealership where I'm depending on my sales rep. How many customers can he visit today? There's no real concept of inbound, probably unless you're like a cat dealer, you have dedicated inbound. But like, why wouldn't you want to make it easier for your customer to buy from you? I think that's like the core tenet of every sales company is how do we make it easier? And so that was our thought process around it. We weren't trying to eliminate positions, but that was kind of how it was received by the existing suppliers.
Yeah, that's a common, when technology comes with market, productivity increases, but that just creates more opportunity and the getting to whatever outcome that is designed for. So in this case would be looking up, which equipment to rent is just a heck of a lot more efficient for both parties. And that's actually, so then those sales reps can actually rent more or sell more or whatever. It's not, otherwise we just wouldn't be, we just wouldn't have, our economy would not be growing. I mean, there's like software in every corner of this thing. And that's what is wild to your point on like, so equipment has been bought online. Iron Planet was a 20-year journey. I mean, that was founded in 1999, and it took that. Then they were sold to Ritchie in 2017, and that is probably a good lesson for those that are, that are doing new things in construction, and certainly construction equipment. It's just a journey. Like it takes longer, but the stakes are big. It is, there's a lot of software needed. There's a lot of, I mean, we're talking about like the economy growing overall. I was mentioning that, but like. Yet construction's going the other way. Like, why is that? And to your point on some of this resistance, like, for sure, and it's just there is a lot of pride in the work, which for sure should be happening. A lot of pride in the relationships, a lot of localized knowledge around what that community needs for equipment and service and all that good stuff. But yeah, I do feel like we're in a little bit of a tech adverse industry.
Did you get, were you guys doing and facilitating rentals and sales? Like, were you getting transactions through that model?
So we were trying to stand up rental. And yeah, so just to frame it out, this was 2017, 18. We were trying to stand up the rental product in it. We went to market with the ability to list parts and tools and equipment, but that's really what was being listed was parts and tools. Mm-hmm. The pull from customers was like buying parts. It was like, that was like what was actually working. And then the equipment rental transaction is different than a car. Like, the models are exponentially higher than autos. And then the contracts, right? Like extending them, putting a deposit down, et cetera, like all these, and they're bigger dollars. There's a lot more to account for in that transaction than when you look at, let's say, like booking on Expedia or whatever. It's just a lot more variables in our industry. So for all those reasons and for the customer pull, we rebranded to Gearflow, really doubled down on parts, and really have been, I guess, talking about basketball before, just like continuing to find more opportunity the more we focus on that procurement problem. Yeah.
Did anything surprise you with that? Like, were you surprised that customers pulled you to parts?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think, and this is for anybody like looking to be an entrepreneur. It's like you should probably be smart enough to like have some common sense about how the world should probably work. That's not working that way today because it's working that way elsewhere in the economy, right? So I think both of us probably had that inclination, and it makes sense. And then what ends up happening is you get in, and like the market just ends up helping you see things just in a way you would have never seen before. And then like actually when you're sitting down with these people, you're like, oh, okay, well that makes perfect sense why this is a much bigger problem, therefore opportunity. And and I, you hear that story again and again and again. Is that I forgot what this was, but obviously there's a famous Twitter example. I forgot their original business model. They're running
Odeo.
out of cash. Okay. And Dorsey, totally changed the model, like completely changed the model. Not even like they completely changed it and it became Twitter. Yeah. So it's there's no shame in it. It's just the way.
No, it's just figuring it out. That's was Ben your co-founder with you at that time?
He was. Man, hats off to him. He left his high-paying job. He put himself through MBA program at Northwestern, Kellogg here in Chicago. Man, and we were paying ourselves minimum wage and doing the thing. Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah, that's and it was just the two of you at that time?
Just the two of us. Yeah.
So then Gearflow happens and it's still just the two of you.
So we were looking for a new brand name because we weren't going to do the rental thing. We were at a Panera Bread in Boston, downtown, and I'm on Google Domains and I'm like tossing ones out to him. He's like on his laptop, he's working, and he was just no on all these suggestions. And I was like, what about Gearflow? He's like, maybe. I'm like, okay, I'm buying it right now.
Were you like always had the mindset of an entrepreneur, like you wanted to start your own business? Like when you were working for the wholesale rental or the wholesale like Genie dealer, was that you're just like, hey, I'm learning the industry, but I have my sights set on starting my own company? Or did you just kind of notice the problems within the industry and that's what the motivation was?
It's a great question. I'd love to hear how you got to Heave as well and jumping in. But so for me, I started my career in logistics tech and always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know what. Logistics tech, I couldn't find where I could drive more efficiencies than the company I was working for at the time. So I was there before they went public, then they went public, a company called Echo Global Logistics. And so I knew I needed to like probably branch out. Like I just couldn't, I wouldn't be doing anything new, which was also the point, right? Like starting the exact same business of a technology company you're leaving to me is just not. It's just like you're just copying a model, and you should just continue to work there and like make them better. But so then was fortunate enough to meet my wife. Her dad again started these companies. I knew nothing about construction, knew nothing about equipment. Jumped in, and it really wasn't until I had the idea in like 15, and then it wasn't until I got blood clots, was staring at a hospital ceiling in 2018, that your sense of more how short of a time we have here and mortality like really comes front and center. And I'm like, you know what? Jeff Bezos calls it the regret minimization theory at 80. It's like, when you look back at your life, and
Sure.
it's totally true for me. Like, I just couldn't imagine being back in a hospital bed, like not having tried and spent all this time like preparing and never like taking a leap. So that's what eventually like just got me to just jump. But yeah, it was something deep that I still needed that experience to really jump. But how about you? What was your journey?
So I was not ever really thinking about starting my own thing. I thought like I craved comfort, but I do think like if I was to look back, I think I had a lot of entrepreneurial traits, but I just didn't recognize that I had them. Where like I wanted to basically determine my own future. That I wanted to solve problems. But I just didn't. I wasn't able to recognize it at the time. I was more of like, hey, I am where I'm at. This is a good thing. I craved that stability. I was always maybe a little fearful of, going out into the unknown. I would tell myself that I was against risk, but then I think back, and I grew up in Philadelphia. My grandparents had a house near Atlantic City, and I was going to casinos at 15 years old, and I was gambling. So I'm like, wait, how can I sit there and tell myself that I'm afraid of risk if I was gambling at 15 years old, 16 years old? So it was weird. So I never really like had that goal. But the more like I thought about it, just having been in the industry, working for a dealer for a long time, you're hit in the face with the daily problems. And I became really frustrated that there was never any change, and we had a lot of different people that would come through our company. Like there were points in time where I would take out a piece of paper and I would write down store managers that we had, service managers that we had as well. And, that person lasted 11 months. That person lasted 2 years. And it was a really long list. And so we had constant turnover. And what was frustrating for me is that you have people come in and then, they would say, hey, we need to do this. And it's like, we've already done that. Like there's no change. And like, I got to the point where I couldn't stomach the Groundhog Day. Like, hey, there is no real technology. And I wasn't like a tech person, but it's just, you look at all these other industries and how technology completely changes the customer experience. And like you mentioned earlier, like there's so much on the line in this industry. Like you don't have to be a Wharton MBA to be like, you know what? Tech has the ability to completely change how things are done in the industry. And so that was kind of the framework that I went through.
Did you find that Groundhog's Day, so that was more, like the churn, and there was a desire to like, man, there's like low-hanging fruit here in tech that we should be taking advantage of that we're not, and getting better. Did you also find that culturally? Like, man, I'd rather steer the ship because we're losing probably good people in there that we shouldn't have lost. Completely.
Culturally. And I think also the interesting thing is that the problems weren't contained to the company I was with. Like, people who work for, the Cat dealer, the John Deere dealer, the Komatsu dealer. They're dealing with the same things. Service was a pain for their customers. Everyone, they say that they are different, but most all of the suppliers operate in the same fashion. And so that was also the other nudge that that helped me, was that it's like, hey, this isn't just our problems. These are kind of industry-wide problems. And then, yes, the cultural piece. Like, I'd been, in leadership positions in sports. I'd been a captain. I liked, and I started at the very bottom in the dealership, and I liked where I was the chief operating officer at the end for the last 3 years before we were sold. I really enjoyed kind of working my way up, and then leading teams of people towards the end. And so that gave me the confidence too to start something, is that I felt like I had accumulated enough knowledge and experience to where I wouldn't really be surprised by anything. I'd been around, executives in the industry, like I had discussions with them, had meetings with them. Like I didn't feel like it was above me.
Do you feel that starting Heave and now like growing this team throughout city by city throughout the U.S., but how that's kind of shaped your approach to work? It sounds like, on the court and then off the court, you've been a high contributor, high energy, like kind of like star performer. And then now to achieve what you guys want to achieve at Heave, have you become like more like team oriented, or like how have you kind of evolved in your approach to team building? And yeah.
That's a good question. I would tell you that I'm a million times more patient today, which might sound paradoxical because in a startup, like you don't have a lot of time
Right.
for the young company. But I know that when I was younger, I was a lot more impatient and a lot probably more demanding, a lot less understanding for when things didn't go right. And since starting the company, and I think just as I got a little older, you have kids. Like I know you've got, I think 4 kids. I have 3. Kids help you become more patient. You start like realizing how much is outside of your control, and the way you react to things, either can add to a situation or make it more difficult. And so it's just like more of that maturity over time. That's why I'm amazed at these 23-year-old kids who start companies, like with really no management experience, with not as much lived experience. Like I could have never done that. I needed every bit of professional experience before I was a founder. Otherwise, it would have failed miserably.
Yeah, I agree. No, the most famous examples, these were all Jobs, Zuckerberg, those were engineers. Bezos, they would tell you they weren't, as good as the people they hired, but they were so good at that they could, bring a product to life and then see it, all the way through and then like road it. That's not me either. And hiring amazing people to work with and like see them grow and help them. They help me, and I'm just very glad and energized to be working with them. And it's this like culture is, I think probably you and I or startup founders, influence becomes a lot of our job. And
yes.
Right, and we've worked enough under good leadership and under not so good leadership to take some lessons there. And that's probably what you're alluding to, is just at that age, like, man, your young 20s out of college or out of high school. I was fortunate enough to meet a founder of a company who's 19, moved from Canada. He was at a Built Worlds convention. I can't wrap my head around it. And he raised the seed round, hats off to him. But it's the life perspective of then leading people who have it, who are in their 30s, 40s and beyond, or whatever they are, is challenging. But that's what's so beautiful about the opportunity we have in our country too, right? And I think I don't know if that played a role in Heave. Is just like,
sure,
man, you can steer the ship, right? And
yeah, everyone's journey is different. It's just mine had to go a certain way. I've always had to like learn hard lessons. You could tell me certain things are going to happen, but I kind of have to touch the hot stove a few times before it sinks in. But so what were the early days of Gearflow like? Because I think all of us have similar stories where it's like when you're in the infancy, you don't really have a team. You're doing a lot of things manually behind the scenes. You're trying to present to customers that it's not manual, like that everything. Hey, we're a tech company of 2 people, right? And so were customers in the early days request or ordering parts online? Were they calling and you guys were facilitating it like basically the old-fashioned way? What were the early days of Gearflow like?
Yeah, it was both. They wanted to know if the site was legitimate.
Yes.
Or we like entering our credit card information in some like black market thing, 100%. And it was manual. It was, you would gear up for whatever the meeting was, customer meeting, investor meeting, and you just have to bring, and not even just you have to just like bring it every time. And your attitude and persistence like just has to be on point, and you just have to, you know, you have bad days like everybody. You just got to keep going. Like you can't wallow in this stuff, and that's probably where getting back to basketball just really helps.
Sure.
Because you'll get the wins, but look, you know, what was it? The best baseball players, the top hitters, are at, I don't know, I'm not but they're in the 300s, right?
Yep.
You know, they're certainly not over 40%, right? And that's like, you know, upper echelons in like 30%. So it's a lot like that, right? And you don't start off batting like that. You start off batting like, you know, in the hundreds or 200s, if you will. So you just got to push through and then take those learnings in real time. Like, just not be afraid to change the business name, change the model. Like, yeah. Go ahead.
Do you remember your first part sale through Gearflow?
Yeah. Well, you know what I remember? We had so we just launched. We got all excited about it. Of course, that's the other thing. I think when before you're launching a company, you think it's a really big deal, and you're like, oh, that's right, the world doesn't care. But
no
we
one
did. We did launch it, and we did have a supplier call. So we were like, oh, score, because that was our big. Like we certainly needed to drive sales, but we needed to drive the supply side in order to get sales. So that was cool. And then we were fortunate enough. We hired this amazing person, Sarah Wilcox. She's based out of Detroit. She has worked for large rental companies, small rental companies. She's done a great job. And and she came on in 2019, a year after it was just Ben and I, and then it was just the three of us, and then, you know, onwards from there. But it just, so much of it is like I'm sure you do with your co-founders, like just like building each other up, right? Picking up, you know, like everybody's got their strengths, right? And so like, how can we all leverage our collective strengths and, you know, get better together? Helps so much. But yeah, I don't know if you have any early stories of just the you know, just starting out.
Of course. I have a printout. It's framed, and it's of our first like 3 months of service orders.
Cool.
Because I used to have to manage all of our service work orders in an Excel sheet. So it's pretty cool. So I look up on the wall every day and I see it. It's like, now obviously we have a real like dashboard that has all the incoming service orders and all the information, like the technicians that put in for a job, then who got booked. But in the early days, it was like a customer requesting service, and then we were calling technicians. We didn't even have an app yet. We were just sending text messages out. Technicians were responding, and then they would book a technician, and we were just managing everything manually. So I had a Excel spreadsheet of like who to bill for how much.
Yeah.
It's and I remember vividly like our first job. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, those times, and then I'm sure you're working nights, weekends, holidays. Like it's
sure.
It just doesn't stop, and same thing. We started with the Google Sheet.
Well. and you're thinking about, even when you're not working, you're thinking about it every day, all day. You're consumed by it. So what was your thought? Like everyone, when you have a marketplace, everyone asks you about the chicken and egg problem, which means, hey, you in order to have a marketplace, you have to have customers, but you also have to have suppliers who want to sell their parts. How do you think about it? What was like your framework for it? Like who was harder to get on, and how did that work?
We thought about it from supply side first. Originally, it was very much supply side driven, to just expose this latent supply on the internet. Which did, and then I guess, you know, through those learnings and through the journey, learned that still the primary way parts are bought, 90% plus 92% is offline. It's like, okay, well, if we're competing for that 8%, you know, Amazon, eBay, Shopify sites, Magento sites, brand name dealer sites from the OEMs, there's just a ton of optionality, which is also like therein the problem, because again, like, you don't care about, you just want a high quality, genuine part on your machine as fast as you can so that you don't experience downtime. Like that was the real pain. So anyway, it took us, so like starting supply side from that, and then it was really like demand driven is what it became.
When you say latent supply, are you talking about like parts that are slow moving or have been sitting on the shelf for a long time?
I just mean, yeah. So like simply like the dealership you were working at, like what if all of that was easily searchable across the state of Florida that you could just like see? But the yeah, so like that was the original thought. And then it became like, oh, they don't know the part number. They don't know what to search for. It's like the reason 9 out of 10 times they're calling, emailing, literally like driving to walk in is to have these conversations, to like, I'm sure the messaging feature in Heave is a big deal, right? Like sharing the pictures, sharing that collaboration is like so central. Yeah.
But I understand. I want to ask you about the difficulty with the part number, but getting back to the latent supply. But was it challenging getting things going if like there's got to be a reason why it's latent supply, right? It's not a frequently purchased part. Like, did you ever feel like you were maybe getting pigeonholed into a position with suppliers where it's like, well, we're not, like the demand for those type of parts doesn't come up that often, so we're not going to be able to prove this out quickly?
Some of that struggle, that's a great question. I mean, on the supply side, it was like, some of them saw it as like, oh, our slow moving parts, like we could list here all day. And then the buy side would be like, okay, our hard to find parts. So like, that's a super, like you're really pressed against like not literally not the majority of how parts are bought. And like you said at the dealership, like, they have, they can, have turnover where you get a different service manager, you get a different parts manager, parts coordinator. They might do inventory differently. They might, some might be less aggressive, some might be more aggressive. Models change, brands change. Like let's say you go with brand A over brand B. Well, now you go as brand B stock. All these things happen at a dealership that makes it challenging from an inventory perspective. And then, meanwhile, the buyers have these like big mixed fleets that they just need. So so like it was a lot, and we're probably going down the path of just like inventory optimization, marketplace features, and you're not going to out Amazon or out eBay at the things and the experience they have. And also, again, that's 8% of how parts are bought. So I think like that was another pivot for it. I mean, then we really got to sit down with these fleet teams and like, what's your process like from end to end? Like when a machine goes down, who are you talking to internally? Who's involved? And like, okay, so like here's this decision tree. Okay, and then you go to the dealer. Like, how do you go to the dealer? And then like, what does that look like? Okay, so then and then like, how often do they have the part in stock? Like, so what we found was on average, companies today who do it manually take 7 days from the moment a part's needed to the moment it's at the machine, and our software compresses that to 1 from their same vendors. Like, and a lot of that's that internal collaboration, external collaboration tools that. So anyway, that was like some of the focus of it. And I don't know about your journey at Heave, if that like, you guys just find more and more ways to just make that service experience more and more magical.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question about getting pigeonholed, because I found that happened with us for a while. And so what was happening was there was a group of customers who, like, they knew we existed, but they put us in this bucket of, well, if my dealer can't help me, if they don't know what to do, then I'll use Heave. And it's like, whoa, hold on. if this really large cat dealer that has 300 mechanics, they've all been factory trained, if they can't figure out the solution, like, then how are we supposed to at a certain point? It's like, can you just try us maybe like for everyday service stuff, like get your feet wet that way? Like it's a pretty hard bar to meet if it's like, hey, no one else can figure this out. So it's funny. It's, when you start a company, it's very clear to you, right? Hey, this is why we're doing it. This is the problem we're solving. So a lot of the puzzle to me that you have to figure out is like, well, how is that received? What is the perception of the market? And you can be very clear with your messaging, but it's just like, you don't know how it comes in for certain people. And we went through like a 90-day period of like learning like, oh, this is how some customers are using us. And it's like, we've got to reframe the conversation.
Right. Yeah. And I would say to that point on, for us, it was that. And then plus what we then were exposed to was all of these fleets adding their vendor side. And as you know it from the dealer side, like getting parts quotes out, if that's 92% of the way they're bought, well, then you've got this like daily, you've got customers walking in, you got customers calling in, you got emails, you got all this stuff happening. And so how can you make that process as seamless as possible and like quote easier, faster, better, meet your customer where they are, give them a mobile app. So that's like the other side of it that we started to go down, which is again, back on the supply side driven. So it was like, starting supply, then demand, now back on supply in a different way, in a different, like not your marketplace e-commerce experience, but more of this like quoting experience with their logo, their people, their process, the whole thing. So
I hate to use too commonly thrown around terms, but I have to. So early adopters is another thing that everyone asks about with a tech company. And it's clear to me what an early adopter customer would look like. Probably a younger manager run company, multiple brands. So, it's clear the value that Gearflow provides. Like you mentioned in the beginning, it's like, hey, instead of having 48 different windows open and it's hard to buy all your parts, it's like we streamline it. It's one place you can buy parts from all your different vendors. Like that, to me, I understand what an early adopter customer probably looks like. What does an early adopter supplier look like for Gearflow?
Yeah, so it's on that thread on they want an easier way to sell their parts. So again, they're probably going to skew younger. They're probably will maybe have done enough research to be like, okay, to stand up a mobile app ourselves or like customer dashboards ourselves is in the millions, right? Like, or we could plug into this and give our customers this experience like turnkey, and we pay a user fee to do it, and like that's great. So. Yeah, some of the in like ultimately, I want just to be the easy button for my customers. I want to give them this option and like be able to quote them all one way. Like I don't want my like 5 parts counter people, for example, like in their Outlook all day. They don't have visibility on what everybody's doing, and the customers it's very hard. So so like they must value that. Themselves probably, and they'll probably be pretty good users of technology just as consumers. And,
are they typically smaller teams of parts people? Are they smaller companies? Or maybe in the beginning, right?
We've learned so far that so OEMs love. I mean, they really get excited about that approach because they know. I mean, those are the ones that have actually invested a lot of money in their e-com experience, which is great, and that should grow over time. But again, the vast majority of the way parts are bought is not that. So they're dealers, they know, like helping solve that. Then we've had really good meetings with tier ones. They're that's been going well. Really good meetings with tier 2 dealers and even some aftermarket. But I would say probably the common thread is valuing that customer experience. Like if we can't get them excited about customer experience, like and growing sales, like this is not a fit.
That's why your experience is really interesting because going back, you started with a rental sale marketplace. So you were dealing with suppliers back then, right? Would you say there was a much different reception when you were solely with the parts piece with Gearflow trying to onboard suppliers than you were with the prior product?
Totally. So this,
what do you chalk that up to?
Yeah. We're just so, it's been years. So, and we're so much deeper in it now than surface level e-commerce. Like we're just talking about, we talk about that parts purchase workflow, which is really what this is for both sides. So much opportunity in the economics to unlock for the fleets to avoid downtime. And then, of course, for the suppliers to really drive more profit. That's how they make their money. So that's what they're doing every day. And now we're, sitting down and talking to them about that process. About, on the supply side, it was, again, customer experience, the future of, what do you think the future might look like for the industry, right? And they're dealing with a manual process on their side every bit as much as a customer. So I think, and again, it gets back to that's how you shape the product. Like you just sit down and you just like learn this stuff, and like you need to go do the work, and you need to like go out to the middle of nowhere and like talk to people and like do that all the time and do it again, and like because otherwise the product it just doesn't matter. Like that's the only way to be impactful in software is like it's got to be so seamless, and that like it's magical is overused, but the only way it's magical is like you friggin' understand like
and it works right, and it delivers on what you say. I just, in my opinion, for whatever reason, suppliers are just more emotional around the rental and sales piece of the business than they are the parts side and the service side. And I think that's one of the differences. And I think I've seen like you guys post this language, or maybe you've talked about it in other places where you ask like, why are parts an afterthought? And I think it kind of speaks to that. It's like parts are a commodity. It's a frequent purchase. Whereas like, so a customer might rent a machine once a month or once every couple months, and they might buy machines once, a couple times a year. So there's a lot more emotion wrapped up into it. And I think that may explain part of why it's easy. It might have been easier and more. They're more receptive to the parts side.
You make a great point. That. And I'm sure you've had these dopamine hits selling machines back in the day.
Sure.
Like, boom, $250K. And they like sign, they finance it or they wire the money, whatever it is. It's like, man, that's great if you're on the dealer side. But then to the customer side, that is how they know you, to your point, a couple times a year. How they know you daily, weekly, monthly is the maintenance side of that, is the parts, is the service, is truly like keeping their fleet and machines up and staying in front of problems. And so, that's how, that's how we kind of want to be seen on the dealer side, is like, hey, you've got your CRM on machine sales. That's great. You got your process there. That's great. You've got your bonus structure there. That's all well-defined. Yet the parts side, which is really that customer relationship, and they know it because you've been on the other side of a big customer giving you a call that like couldn't get what they need or whatever, right? It just becomes this like hair on fire moment. And of course. And making that as easy as possible on both parties is like, is exciting.
You kind of alluded to it, but haven't talked about it specifically. Gearflow early days was a parts marketplace, but you've kind of navigated away from a true marketplace. Is that right? Like I heard you talk about there. Parts Hub Pro, I think. Correct. Is what.
Yeah, you got it. So Parts Hub Pro is all the software, for the fleet we've been talking about. And then for the dealer side, it's Sales Hub Pro for parts dealers. Marketplace is still there. So there's 3 million SKUs on the site. People come in, they buy, they create accounts every month. There's a free plan. We have a freemium model, so anybody can come check it out for free. But like our engineering resources are, go to market, our sales motion. It's all really around fleet teams and vendors.
And you have, what's unique is you have like customers will pull in their suppliers. I'm sure suppliers will also pull in customers as well. So you have it working from both sides. Have you had situations where like OEMs will help bring in dealers into?
Yeah, we're talking to a few now. So the Sales Hub Pro product, so Parts Hub Pro launched middle of last year. Sales Hub Pro, middle of this year. So it just really public launch about 90 or so days ago. And so we're in talks with several OEs about that. Because again, they have very aligned with their dealers on machine sales and part sales, right? Like how can they help them sell more? How can they, buy more parts so that they sit on their, in their inventory to then sell it? That's the model, right? So, so there's just a digital divide between parts that are bought online and parts over the phone. And so the more we can help bridge that digital divide, I think, just helps the whole equipment triangle. Ultimately, customers are buying from whom they add. Like that's what's actually happening. Like there's not this appetite, and shoot, maybe we act like that as consumers too. If you buy Nike shoes or whatever shoes, like that's what we want, right? We want to buy from that dealer we trust. And
You do. It's because it's not. There's no risk involved, right? You've done it. That's where like the new behavior. It's hard for certain people to get over the line. Is that there's risk. We used to say, or not we, but the saying used to be on the dealer side: no one gets fired for buying a cat. So if you're a challenger brand, and it's the customer buys your product and then it's down on the job site, the owner of the company comes by the job site and machines are sitting there and it's not a cat. It's like, well, why did you do that? Right? Like, so yeah, it's not as risky. And that's, I think, what drives it.
Peter on our team calls it fear of messing up. Just like a lot of us just have that fear of messing up. It's not even like, so that might outweigh our desire for new.
Definitely. So I assume that you're chipping away at that 92%, and that's the goal every day. Well,
that's
right?
what kind of we're saying is like, hey, the way. So yes, so fleets add their vendors add their customers, right? If they upgrade, and there's a lot of software behind why they would do that, and making it easier, driving higher sales conversions on parts and time. But yeah, then that's the point. Is like it is still that quoting process. But now that it's in this environment and in the tool, it's just so much easier to do, so much faster to do. There's a lot of built-in follow-up automations and other automations in the software. It should count, right? Where it's not like a classic e-commerce sale, let's say, that we scroll to this website, we find whatever product we're looking for and we buy it. Our point is like that is great. And then this should be seen as well as that in digital sales. So like your digital sales are growing no matter which path they choose. And oh, by the way, for the people that still like to call in, like to walk in, that's great. We love that they're buying. This is one way to quote them. So this is one way to follow up with them, keep them updated on their order, all that good stuff. That you're not abandoning any account. You're just really bridging that 90%.
When you're sitting with a customer or potential customer, I'm sure there are common questions about Gearflow. What are like the 2-3 common questions that you get all the time?
Yeah, I think a lot of people get wrapped up. Whenever we come into a meeting, they know their internal processes really well. They're experts in them. They built them. They are ingrained in their ERP, from their dealer management system or business system, their CRM. Whatever standard operating procedures they have, they're very proud of on both sides, as they should be. And so we're like, great, that's great. Like that's how the company grows. The internal collaboration needed to figure out maintenance events on the fleet side and then communicate that out and collaborate with your dealer doesn't need to be that hard. This sits alongside all this great fleet management software, other software you guys have. Or sometimes it's integrated with, it sits inside the work order process to basically shrink that time down and then give you insights on your fleet team and your vendors. And then from the vendor side, it's kind of the same thing. They have all their internal processes. How do we think about this as we are a net new thing to evaluate, right? So I need to come into this meeting with more of an open mind. I think Gearflow, we need to do a good job of understanding the opportunity that exists for them, whether they're a fleet team or whether they're a vendor, in the upside of really looking at that transaction and making it as seamless as possible. And then it goes well. And then if they're too like, nope, this is the way it's always been done, this is the way it's always going to be, that's then it doesn't. But the ones that are lean into that, we have a lot of success with.
I love talking about mistakes. Every new company it has learnings from mistakes. What are some of the early mistakes at Gearflow?
Man, that's a great question. Oh gosh, I could what are the mistakes from this morning, man? Oh my God. I think the crystal ball thing is like you just can't lose sleep over it. If we went to market with all the things we know today, we'd have built a different product from day one. But you just can't let that bother you. But yeah, I would just say it's just a lot of that. Like how much did we invest that then we didn't prioritize because we went a different route. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. And yeah.
What's something that you wish you would have prioritized sooner?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, we grew during COVID and we have just a phenomenal team. And now what we're doing, we're hybrid. So we're trying to now bring everybody back more regularly to Chicago, hire in Chicago, and kind of foster this culture that's in person. Yeah, and you know, you can look at the other side. The contrarian view is like, well, you know, we have incredibly talented people. We have a great unit, and everybody has a lot of fun. We're highly productive, and that's all great. And that's what really ultimately what you want. I would just, you know, we're trying to kind of like reverse engineer the in-person. But yeah, I mean, that's front of mind for me right now, but not, you know, I think ultimately the moves we had to make in terms of evolving the business made sense at the time when we made them. And, you know, then we were, you know, hopefully quick enough to follow the demand, listen to our customers, change the product, hire the best people we absolutely can, you know, really talk about our values, talk about our culture, grow that, you know, everybody accelerates that who's hired and adds to it. So I think then for our next phase, it's just, you know, it's really building out our footprint here.
Who do you consider your competition? Like you mentioned Amazon and eBay. Like, is that who you consider your competition, or is it some?
I would say when we originally it was, but now it's really pen and paper. It's really the way business has always been done. And you're smiling.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, status quo.
Habit.
Yeah, and then, you know, Karen on our team does a great job talking about being, are they problem aware? Are they aware this is even a problem, even something to consider?
I've noticed your marketing. I wrote that down. What is it? Something like this worked just fine, or something. And then it's like a picture of like a rotary phone or something, like speaking to that, right? Yeah, exactly.
She's got like VHS tape in there. She has a floppy disk. She's got and it's all for the better. And by the way, to the other point of like losing jobs, like, you know, no, right? Like all of this technology that we've used, and we do a lot of hardware stuff because it's easy to, you know, it's visceral. But yeah, it makes people more productive when those, you know, evolve and yeah, and it's an exciting moment. More broadly, you know this in construction, there's so much that's got to get built in our country, from single family homes to the commercial side to the infrastructure side. Like there's so much, and you know, our generation is smaller than the boomers, so there's like less people to do it, and we've been like losing productivity. So it's like it should be so exciting. It's so exciting. To be, and lo and behold, the construction jobs are some of the most stable, best jobs now in the country, where it used to kind of be poo-pooed. It's like, what a career. And so, so anyway, but you know,
I'd like to ask you about your fundraising journey. Sure. That's a very unique process. So have you raised a Series A? Is that right?
We call those seed rounds, and the only reason is, and like the revenue threshold for a Series A keeps getting bigger, and then the rounds keep getting bigger. So like seed has been like, and then therefore there's like different stages of seed. But yeah, so anyway, but you know, Series A is probably still in the future.
You've raised though 2 separate rounds of capital, or
we've raised a total of 13. And and we have institutional partners.
Did you like that process?
Do I like the taste of my own blood? No. You have to get to like that. But you know what? That's another one that your attitude, almost just like customer meetings, you just have to stay up. You have to stay positive. You have to drive the process. You've got to display a ton of ability to go into the fine details, as well as the vision on a dime, and still take customer calls, still take customer meetings, make sure our team is like, we're doing the right things as a team and we're growing. I think through that, then you come out the other side. You know what I love to think about is like, here's all these brilliant people that are out there. There's a lot of them. Like the ecosystem is big. I still feel like I just like tip of the iceberg. Like I really don't know it. How cool is that? Like there's all these really smart people. They got their MBAs. MBA is not for me. You know, I totally respect it, and I love that we work with a lot of MBAs. That's great. That just their whole job is, you know, the evaluating part, but then eventually like coming onto the board. That's a bigger that's a key decision. But man, you get good board members, and it's such a boon to your growth as a leader, as a professional, and to the company than you ever would have got if it was still Ben and I.
Completely. Did you have any meetings from potential investors where they force you to think about your company and your product in a way that you hadn't before, and maybe it gave you the opportunity to sharpen what you had? Something that because you're completely right. Like the ability to meet with such brilliant people who their main job is just to look at and assess and evaluate companies. That's what they do every day. Yeah. They probably take 8 to 10 company presentations a day, every day. They know what the ingredients look like of really successful companies. They know what failures also look like. Right. And did you have any of those moments where it's like, hey, I was unprepared for what they asked, and that's something, man, they brought my attention to it. We should address that.
100%. So James Currier is with a company called NFX, and I've taken something he said. It just pops in my head.
Is that Pete Flint's company too?
Right. That's his partner. Right. Yes, you got it.
Got it.
Yeah, they're great. They're not investors. They're just great. I really respect them. Investors in Gearflow. I mean, they are professional investors. But yeah, and something that pops in my mind as you were describing that is James recommended at the end of every meeting you take, ask for their feedback. Like you've got these people on the phone, and 95+% of them aren't going to invest, but you've got it. And you've just explained your business. You've just explained your go-to-market. To your point, they've had this amazing purview into other companies that have maybe similar models in different industries. What's their feedback? And I think you got to kind of take it as that too, right? So where it's not like you're going to hear like an insane amount of no's.
Yes.
But if you feel like you're growing, if you feel like you're viewing the same thing a different way, and you've got someone else's perspective, that's just helping you get better.
Yeah, I agree. I had those moments like in the beginning. I was in like defend mode, where it's like no, they just don't see it. They don't see it. They're wrong. I know the industry better than they do. And then you hear something a couple times, and you're like, maybe we need to address that. And it just forces you to look at it, if you look at it in the right way, and sharpen it up.
Right.
And so some of those meetings have been very, very helpful for me. And it's been from the companies that passed on us. Right.
Yeah. And then the companies that are in, just spending time in person with them is big. Getting them acclimated to the weeds is big, because again, they're doing the same thing. They're just now on the board, and they see all these other companies, and they're now like, I just think it's such a cool thing to be able to start a business. There's a whole ecosystem of capital and very smart people that's all they do, is like invest and help founders. How cool is that? Not that I want to be one. I love being in the operator seat, but like how cool is that they're out there to invest in product before you really make it, and then sitting alongside you for the ride, and that would be the one thing, right? Is like making sure you really know, you trust, you have a great relationship with those on your board and have a vote, because they're also, that's a boon to the business as well. Is having great directors. What are your thoughts on that? I don't know.
Yeah, I completely agree. And number one, they're invested with you, right? So they are in it for you to be as successful as possible. So I think some people view it incorrectly as, well, yeah, they shouldn't have input. I'm the expert. And it's like, no. Like, this is an asset to you. And I think it's best to use those assets because, like you said, they are exposed to so many different companies, and it's good to me that they don't have the biases that you might have, because I think it can be dangerous when you're so close to something to have somebody who you trust, who's really bright, who can maybe help provide another perspective.
Right. Right. Yeah. How great is that? Right. That we, they're investing the capital and the time alongside us, and it's what an amazing opportunity it is, I think, for founders. Yeah,
and I feel like it's good to be challenged, right? Like, it takes you back kind of to the early days of, like, everything is a challenge in the early days because you don't really have something that's working. So you're constantly having to assess certain things, make small tweaks and changes. And I think that's a really good part of, like, having investors involved with you, is like, hey, as the company gets bigger and you're more successful, they can help still challenge certain things to keep you fresh, to keep you sharp. Otherwise, you can maybe start to get an inflated sense of where you are, and then you become susceptible to other things.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's from, just, to your point, an ego check and also a perspective check, right? Where, being able to leverage somebody else's experience, and also, again, what's working out there in the market. So just having people around you that are exposed to different ideas and different concepts constantly on an ongoing basis outside of just pitching, right? Because you get a flood of that when you're pitching. And then after an investment is made and after you stop, because now we're just 100% refocused on the business, I think that's really cool too. Just continuously be pushed by that outside perspective. But man, I mean, and it's a journey, right? I think, to our earlier point, creating in this space new technology is a longer cycle, than what consumer tech probably takes in some areas.
What would you say, you guys, like, the big focus is on in the near future? Like, what's something that you're working on that every day, the whole team, like, knows, like, hey, this is what we're after? What's the big focus?
Yeah, so we're excited about the product, Sales Hub Pro, that recently went to market for parts dealers and vendors. So we're excited to just get more of that, out in the hands of the market. There's been over 900 vendors added to the platform organically. So there's been a lot of activity from fleets adding vendors. And we've got a really cool case study of a Kohler generator distributor out of California, Bay City Electric Works, uses the software to quote all of their customers, and actually drove their conversion rate increase by 52%. So yeah, we're just excited to talk to more and get that out more in the market and learn more from that side. So that's probably the biggest thing we're excited about right now.
So it's you feel really good and confident about the state of the product. You feel good about just all the pieces. It's, for you guys, the focus is on scale and just acquiring more demand.
Yeah, I think, so the freemium model. So we have a few hundred people every month coming to sign up for the free version. Then we really focus our sales efforts around those larger fleets on the buyer side. And then, really kind of, the software is really built. It starts at $100 per user per month. So, I mean, even small parts dealers and suppliers, a small team, that's totally fine. All the way up, to your tier 1 dealers who have hundreds of people. And what's cool is, it's very reciprocal. If you build better software for one side, it will help the other side, which is so cool. So, all that time we spent on the fleet side, well, now the vendors basically get a turnkey experience to add their customers and quote their customers to the software, who get a turnkey experience and dashboard into all their quotes, all their communication, invoices, all that good stuff is just turnkey. So again, that's what would cost millions to create, from scratch, and a lot of time that they just get to plug in this dashboard, this mobile app.
I don't know if you know this quote or have read it. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, I think, he said something like, if you're not embarrassed by your first product, it's not good enough or you're not big enough. Are you embarrassed by your first product at Gearflow?
Yeah, well, so when people were calling us to make sure our site was real and we weren't trying to take their credit card for this part. Yeah, man. I mean, it was like load times were, it was like 15-second load times. I mean, it was just crazy. Yeah.
Good for you. No.
How about you?
Yeah, it's funny, like I kind of forget. Like we had an onboarding session like 2 weeks ago where we had a bunch of new people start, and I kind of forgot that we didn't even have a technician app in the beginning, that we were just sending out alerts via SMS. So yes, I would say that I am embarrassed by the first version of our product, but it's funny, like how I forget certain things.
You know what though? I mean, what a great way to start that product, because you just want to see if it's valuable. Like you just want to get it out there. You want to connect the people and like get those maintenance events like done and see if people care. That's great. Like I also applaud you for not over-engineering that.
Well, I over-engineered the hell out of our first product. So that was also part of my learnings, is like, hey, let's make sure we have something before we like really go full bore after it. What is really funny to me is you bring up you said it a couple times about how people, weren't sure if it was real. We got the same thing too. It's like a technician would download the app and or a customer would, and they'd be like, is this a scam? And it's like, really? Like, this is some elaborate plan to get a customer to order service and then not have anyone show up or something. Like, we don't take credit cards like to reserve a technician or anything. Like, we're not asking for anything up front. And for people to still ask, like, oh, is this a scam? Like, there's nothing for us to gain here unless an actual service happens, machine gets repaired and the customer's happy. So it's funny just how people's mindset in the industry is.
Well, they were clearly searching. They needed it enough to be like, is this a scam? I definitely need this, but I want to make sure. Like that's
pretty funny. Well, I appreciate your time today. It's been awesome to catch up and hear the latest on the business. We pay attention to what you guys are doing. We've been a customer of yours a few times where a technician has diagnosed an issue and we've put in, they've actually gone to their existing network and the customer's like, man, this part is like 3 weeks out, and our people know, like, hold on. Let's see. Let's try it. Let's try this. And we've gone to Gearflow, put in for the parts, and we've been able every time to cut that dramatically down. Like in time, sometimes it was like, hey, the quoted time was like 3 weeks, and we were able to get the part like in 3 to 5 days.
Great.
Other time, every time it's been really user friendly, and we've introduced customers that way where it's like, we come back to them, and because for us it benefits because of the entire service experience. They're just wowed, and they're like, how did you do that? We're like, oh, well, there's a marketplace called Gearflow. You should check it out. And so we've used it a few times, and it's been great to follow your story, and look forward to for you guys, wishing you continued success.
Same to you. I mean, that's I really admire how there's so many independent mechanics throughout the country, the journeymen, that aggregating that, the demand side is there, and there's just a lot of great people that can help. That was just too cumbersome without an app, and that's just so cool that like you've really like unlocked all these like hardworking great mechanics that are available. That and that's also like helping drive stability in their lives, or certainly more jobs than they ever would have gotten. And then, more uptime of machines and vice versa. I think, we've recommended Heave many times, and just really cool experience how you're also like very mobile. The journey, I don't know if you guys were studying Uber or not, but it's just super, it's just clean. It's very clean, like ordering an Uber. So yeah.
Appreciate it.